Being a horror writer can seem like a terrifying thing, and I'm not gonna lie to you, it is. At least in the beginning. When I was just starting to write, I would look for inspiration by writing at 4 or 5 a.m., and when the ideas were flowing and the stories were good, I couldn't help but close all the doors of my closet or my bathroom because I was scared of my own stories. As time went by, I started writing about real cases on a YouTube channel, and as I found out about real cases, I got more and more into horrifying and unbelievable cases. As I delved deeper into the minds of the killers, the fear increased. But all that didn't last long. When a writer gets too deep into the world of horror, he loses all sensibility about it. He writes about the most terrible cases without a drop of sweat, without feeling anything at all. My name is Gustavo, and this used to happen to me until I had an experience like the one I wrote about that made me understand the real terror suffered by all the real victims of whom we wrote the story. I may not have been locked in a back room with an evil cat that day. I may not have summoned a demon playing Ouija on Halloween, or been stalked by someone from the deep web on Omegle. But on that day, my life was as much at risk as any of them. It all started on a summer night, and I have to tell you that I hate the heat. So I started writing so I wouldn't have to think about running out of air. I know a lot of writers who still use typewriters, but since all my stories were destined for my blog or a YouTube channel, I obviously preferred my computer. I got up from my chair and headed for the fridge to get a cold drink. What I didn't know at the time, and wouldn't find out by watching the cameras hours later, is that I wasn't alone. There was someone watching me through the window. With my mind on a case I was researching for my next story, I headed to my computer and after sipping my apple soda, continued typing. At that point, it wasn't too late, so I got a call from my girlfriend, unaware of what was going on behind me.
Hey, how are you? Of course I can accompany you. I'll wait for you at the bus stop tomorrow morning. Great, let me just finish this story and I'll call you on Skype, okay? Sure. Love ya.
Again, it wasn't until I saw the cameras several hours later that I understood that my life was at the mercy of a psychopath. I continued to write, but suddenly, and without being able to save anything I wrote, the power in my house went out.
Come on, really?
This sometimes happened in my house, as the fuse box was a bit old, and I had to go down to the basement to fix it. What I didn't know was that the person who was behind me before had not only walked in the direction of the basement, but he was the one who cut the light. In the dark, I descended the stairs to the basement. I went in slow motion so as not to fall, but I had to admit that I felt a little scared. Until now, I had been lucky that the power outages were usually during the day. As this caught me off guard, I didn't even have time to prepare my flashlight, as I didn't know where I had left it. I continued down the stairs one by one and in slow motion, telling myself that it was just my house, that I had nothing to do with it, when in reality, my life was at risk with every step I took down those stairs. After descending those steps that took forever, I walked slowly in the dark to the fuse box. I didn't need light for this, just to lift a switch that was just a few steps away from me, but that felt like it was miles away. When I got there, I reached out with my fingers and found the switch. The light was back on, and I breathed a sigh of comfort. I walked relieved towards the stairs, again thinking about the story and how much I had lost of it because of the cut, when suddenly, I heard a noise coming from the fuse box, so I turned and looked at it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A person was inside my house. I couldn't see anything and I got desperate, so I ran as fast as I could up the stairs. But in an attempt to go faster, my foot slipped and I fell to the bottom of the basement with the invader. Terrified and with an extremely sore leg, I couldn't muster the strength to stand up and climb the stairs, so I crawled backwards and stayed against the wall, hiding. The only source of light coming into the basement was a small trickle of light coming from a small window at the top of the basement, but that didn't help me at all to know where I was. I tried to keep quiet, not to make the slightest noise. I closed my eyes to sharpen my senses and heard him better than ever. That person was still standing next to the fuse box, but now he was coming in my direction. Every step felt like a huge rumble. I took a deep breath and clutched my chest, trying not to make any noise that would give me away, trying not to breathe loudly or cry from fear. Meanwhile, the terror continued and was getting closer and closer to me. Step, step, step. He was getting closer and closer to me. Meanwhile, I could feel everything. I felt my heart beating violently, my blood rushing desperately through my veins. I felt that for every second that passed, I was getting older. The footsteps stopped next to me. Had the invader seen me? I didn't hear the footsteps anymore. Instead, I heard him breathing. His breathing sounded agitated. Surely he was not getting much air, not with that huge mask he was wearing. I thought about fighting him, but I'm not gonna lie to you, I was really scared. The footsteps began to move away. He was looking for me. I took advantage of the fact that he moved away from me and started to crawl up the stairs, very slowly. I was going to make it. I was going to escape from there. Desperate, I didn't realize that the keys to the basement were still in my pocket. Because of the friction, they slipped out of my pants and hit a step. I managed to catch them before they continued falling, but the damage was already done. The intruder ran, so I made a last effort to go for the door, but the man jumped at my leg and started pulling me back. I grabbed the door, and with several kicks, I managed to hit him until he let me go and fell. When he got to the bottom, he made no effort to climb back up. As the thread of light coming from outside pointed at his mask, he just stared at me, frozen. I locked the door and called the police, who soon arrived. When they came down, the man was still in the same position he was in when I had escaped. Outside the mask, he was just a normal man. Nothing striking, a face that could be that of a neighbor, a friend, or even a relative. When the police questioned him, he confessed that he was a fan of mine, that he had found out where I lived, and that he wanted to leave a mark on my life forever. You're wondering if this person was going to kill me. The only thing I will tell you was that this man was a killer on the run, with more than 10 fatal victims. I never heard from him again, nor did I care to. But as much as I hated to admit it, he had succeeded. From that day on, every time I wrote a horror story, I thought of him. In the fear I felt when he was next to me, and in that horrible moment when, even for a few seconds, I thought I would not get out of that situation alive.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the video. If so, please leave a like. And also, a small percentage of people that watch my videos are actually subscribed. If you want to support this channel and make this channel reach the 1 million mark, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can change your mind later. Enjoy.
Jonathan, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Mina, do you take Jonathan to be your lawfully wedded husband?
I do.
By the power vested in me by God the Almighty, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride.
I still remember the day I married Jonathan. He hesitated when the priest said he could kiss me. I felt the distance between us right then, and now, in these past few months, that distance has only increased. Even though we share a bedroom, he spends most of his nights in the basement of our house. He inherited a good amount of money from his parents, and also this big, stranded house. Sometimes I feel this house is too big for 2 people. To pass my time, I keep myself busy in gardening, and Jonathan in his experiments. There's a small room in our basement with a red door. Even though I'm allowed to go into the basement, Jonathan never lets me go inside that room. He keeps it locked and carried the key with him 24/7. Upon asking him, he says it's his private laboratory. There are dangerous chemicals and expensive machinery scattered in that room, which is why it isn't safe for me to go in. So far, I've just brushed it off, but now I'm sure that there is something very wrong with the man I was married to. One night, I woke up hearing footsteps downstairs and found myself alone in the bed. I got up and peeked downstairs to see my husband heading down the basement with a dead raccoon in his hand. Blood was dripping from its gushed out entrails. I asked with genuine concern,
What is that in your hand, Jonathan?
He looked up nervously, not expecting to see me awake, then smiled awkwardly, saying,
Just a roadkill.
What are you doing with roadkill?
Need it for the experiment. go get some sleep. I'll be up soon.
And that's it. This is what Jonathan does every single day. He wanders into the woods, drives down the highway collecting roadkill and dead animal carcasses. A few days ago, a big box arrived from Amazon. My husband was busy in the basement, so I received the package. I was about to open it when he came running.
Mina, that's not for you.
What's in it? It's so heavy.
Nothing. Just some beakers and important lab equipments for the experiment.
He almost snatched the box from my hand and went back to the basement. I knew I'd go crazy if I didn't find out what was happening in that basement, so I made a plan. While making breakfast, I heard Jonathan coming to the kitchen. I quickly grabbed my phone and acted as if I was talking to my mother.
Sure, Mom. Yeah, it has been a while. I haven't seen you guys either. Okay, I'll be there soon.
I pretended to disconnect the phone call when Jonathan asked.
Is everything all right?
Yeah, it's just Mom. I was thinking of visiting them tonight. With you being so busy with your experiments, I get bored a lot.
I saw a surprising sadness on his face. Even though we were living under the same roof for a while now, Jonathan never showed me any affection. He scratched his head and asked,
When will you be back?
Tomorrow. Why?
He came close and held my hand for the first time. His eyes were different.
I know I haven't been a good husband to you. I'll be done with my experiment tomorrow, so I was thinking we can finally go somewhere and spend some time.
Sure.
You promise you'll be back tomorrow?
I'm just gonna be at my mom's house, not to some other country.
Just promise me that you'll be back by tomorrow.
He sounded more adamant than pleading. I couldn't tell if it was love or something else, though. I nodded my head.
Yes, I'll be home tomorrow.
When I started the engine, Jonathan stood at the driveway waving me goodbye. This was the first time in the last months Jonathan treated me like his wife. I was questioning myself that maybe I shouldn't spy on him. Some men are reserved by nature. It takes time for them to open up. And maybe he really is doing some stupid science experiment, but something at the back of my mind kept telling me the truth isn't always visible. After roaming around the town for 3 hours, I parked my car into the woods and waited for the night to fall. I might have dozed off. When I woke up, it was dark outside. The crickets were chirping in the bushes. I got down from the car and walked to the house. The house was in deep silence. I carefully opened the main door with my keys and entered. I was sweating in fear, not knowing what was going to happen next. I tiptoed to the basement. A rotten smell of days-old meat hit me right away. The sound of movement and objects cluttering was coming from the room with the red door. It wasn't locked this time. A thin ray of light was coming from the gap behind the door. Not having me around gave Jonathan full freedom tonight. I stopped outside the red door. My heartbeat got faster, taking a long, deep breath. I peeked in. Jonathan was standing in front of something. I couldn't tell what. Piles of dead animals' entrails, fur, and skin were scattered all over the floor. It took me a few seconds to realize what Jonathan was holding in his palm. A big eyeball, probably dissected from one of his roadkills. Is he going to eat it? He slowly raised his hand. I was sure he was about to eat it, but no. On his other hand, he had a tube of superglue. He applied some glue on the eyeball and then stuck it on the thing standing in front of him. So far, his body has been blocking my view, but now he moved aside. What I saw made my heart leap into my throat. A rising panic made my body tremble. There was a mannequin right in the middle of the room, but the mannequin was covered with thousands of eyeballs. Some eyeballs were small, each having different colored pupils. After all, they belonged to various different dead animals. It was like a vicious artwork where a human body is set on display after being decorated with raw, dead eyeballs. So, this is what came from Amazon. Jonathan ordered a freaking mannequin so he could experiment with his diluted sense of creativity. But even though its entire body was covered, the actual place where eyes should be remained hollow. The eye sockets were empty with no sets of eyes in them. Jonathan admired the horrible statue for a few seconds and blew it a kiss. I felt like I needed a bath seeing him react that way. The real horror came after. He smiled ear to ear and said in a spine-chilling voice,
"One more day. Just one more day. Once Mina comes back, you will have your human eyes. You will finally be complete."
I was in a complete state of panic. My hands were cold and clammy. Dread twisted in my gut. That means all that affection in the morning, the gesture of showing me that he really wants me, was nothing but a lie. He wanted me to come back so he could have my eyes. What kind of psychopath is my husband? I wanted to get out of the house. I wanted to run as far as possible from him. I got out just like I came in. When I sat inside the car and was about to start the engine, I got a text from Jonathan.
"Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Miss you, love."
This happened in the summer of 2010, when I was just entering my teenage years. My elder sister was having her first baby, so our entire family rushed to the hospital. My mom and dad were constantly talking to the doctor while my brother-in-law was inside the delivery room. I was sitting in the hospital lobby, a little tense for my sister. A few hours later, the doctor came out and told us that she will be having a delayed delivery, so it might take up to 5 to 6 hours more. My dad told my mom it would be better if we just spent the night in the hospital so we can stay close to Bethany. We grabbed some sandwiches from the hospital cafeteria and waited for the newborn to arrive. Now, I was merely 11 years old and hence got easily bored. My parents were busy calling our relatives and talking to the hospital staff, which gave me the perfect opportunity to explore the hospital independently. But I knew my parents would never say yes to this plan, so I lied to them. I walked up to my dad and said,
"Dad, can I have $1 for the soda machine?" "Here, go."
He gave me the money and got back to his conversation with the doctor. They never expected me to wander into a big hospital at 1 a.m. As soon as I got the $1, I headed straight to the soda machine, which was on the second floor. The delivery was happening on the third floor, the maternity ward. Once I got down to the second floor, I realized how stranded the hospital was at that hour. There was a lady attendant in the reception watching videos on her phone and laughing. She looked at me once and then went back to her phone. I walked to the end of the corridor, stopped near the soda machine and inserted the money. Just when I was about to press the button for soda, I saw 2 men wearing white lab coats come out of the elevator. They seemed quite agitated, and I overheard their conversation.
"And then I told her there's a reason why the psych ward is located in the basement. Seriously, some interns never learn." "I know, they think passing an exam makes you a doctor, but you don't know shit until you step into the real environment."
The 2 men walked past me, continuing this discussion with anger and restlessness. I didn't understand the context of their conversation, but one thing that stuck to me was that the hospital has a psych ward in the basement. I was not aware of the medical terminology, so I thought psych ward stood for something kind of like a secret laboratory. My interest piqued quite immediately. I grabbed the soda can and got into the elevator, but instead of going up, I started going down. Destination: basement. The elevator door opened, making its usual ding sound. A long corridor with a red door at the end stood in front of me. A man dressed as a security guard was dozing in the corner. Without disturbing him, I managed to get to the door. The signboard on the top of the door flashed "Psych Ward" in big block letters. I expected to see scientists running around with beakers and test tubes in their hands, but stepping in, I saw nothing like that. Just a sketchy, yellowish hallway with blinking lights. A pungent smell of urine and strong chemicals clogged my lungs. On both sides of the hallway stood lined up cabins. I took a sip from my soda can and started walking ahead. For the first few rooms, I saw nothing because the doors were closed. Then I noticed a room on my left. Its door was wide open and a sound of heavy breathing was coming from that direction. The saying that kids are stupid 100% applies in my case. I stopped outside the room to see what was inside. There was a bed and a woman. The woman was chained to the bed tightly. Her hands and legs were tied with metal shackles. She was breathing heavily. Her bony body was going up and down with each inhale and exhale. It wasn't my first time in a hospital, so I got confused seeing a patient kept in that way. I took another sip, resulting in a slurping sound, when suddenly the woman turned her head towards me, opening her big, scary eyes.
What are you drinking?
I will never forget her face. She had no flesh, only skin wrapped around her skull.
Sprite.
I haven't had Sprite in such a long time.
Why are you tied to the bed?
I don't know. The people here are cruel. They treat me like an animal. Will you give me some soda, little boy? Don't be cruel like them. Come close and pour some soda into my mouth, please.
I looked at the door where I entered. The security was still outside. I hesitated for a second, then slowly approached her.
There you go. You're such a good boy.
Her eyes dazzled with each step I took towards her. When I was inches away, she opened her mouth, took out her red tongue, and made a hissing sound. I sprinted away from her in fear, drops of sweat appearing on my forehead. The woman let out a huge grin and then started singing.
Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer due. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you.
I rushed to leave, but suddenly the room opposite of hers opened, and a man wearing nothing but underwear came out. He was about 8 feet tall and had a huge head that bobbled constantly. He stretched his arms towards me and picked me up from the ground. My feet were dangling in the air. He smelled my hair and looked me dead in the eyes. He never blinked. I was so horrified that I forgot to scream. He finally put me down and said,
"You're not her. She smelled different when I dug her up,"
and walked back into his room. I would have peed my pants if he didn't let me go. I ran straight to the door, pushed it with all of my strength, waking up the security from his dreamland, and burst into tears. He was shocked to see a kid around 1 a.m. wandering inside the psych ward. I was crying so badly that my words barely made any sense. He escorted me to the reception on the second floor right that moment. The woman at the counter had already seen me before, so she remembered my face. She announced finding an 11-year-old lost in the hospital. My parents were also searching for me by then, so they came down after hearing the announcement. My mom hugged me tight, and my dad scolded me for roaming around the hospital without any adults by my side. My sister had given birth to my niece by then, so my traumatic situation robbed me of the chance to celebrate for her. There were formalities left for her discharge, so my dad stayed back with my brother-in-law, and I was taken home by my mom. The entire night, I slept hugging her. Even today, when I recall that terrifying memory, I hear the woman's voice in my head, her creepy laughter, and her even more creepy singing.
Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer due. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you.